Hey there, welcome to the Ryan Kingsline Show. My name's Ryan Kingsline, and in this podcast, we interview amazing artists, creatives, and creators to find out how they tick and how they got where they are today. So sit back, relax. I look forward to sharing their journey with you. Okay, so this is our first conversation. Why don't we start by just you telling me what you do.
So I've been in the career or in the industry for over 10 years now. And at the moment, I help run an academy here in Sydney, Australia called the UTS Animalogic Academy. And there I act as a creative director and a creative lead. So basically what we do there is we lead our students through a simulated studio environment. So it's so different to any other schooling. We're also pretty much challenging the way that, teaching is done in academia. We're practically led all the way. I myself don't have much education in that sense, although I am doing a master's of research on the side, but I have over a decade of experience. So what we're trying to do really is to bridge the gap between young artists as the guys that you teach as well, and give them take these amazing foundational skills that they have, but then take them and put them into a real world problem and in terms of a real studio environment. So we've got 28 students this year. They all work together on one project. I put them through a creative process where they come up with a really strong 2-minute animation. And then we go into it like in production mode. So that's from a film side, VFX side. That's the first semester. Second semester, we jump into a more game dev side. So there we explore emerging technologies. And that's where my research really extends itself into. It's mixed reality, virtual reality, augmented reality. For me, that's the future. There will always be games, there will always be film, and I love them equally much. However, what we try to do here is empower our students to actually look further and be ahead of the curve in terms of once VR and once we all are wearing our Apple headsets, which we will at some point, there's going to be a huge call for content. And we want to empower our students to be creators in this field and also be ready to work for companies in this field.
Walk me through the diversity of this, of your background, because like I said, you got film, you got games, you've got looks like some commercial work.
All right. So I started as just a 3D artist, thought I was going to be a generalist, thought I was going to work in games. I did a 1-year degree, it's a Cert 4. It doesn't really count for anything as the paper does. But as we both know, it's not much about paper, it's experience and it's your portfolio. It's your portfolio and your attitude that's going to get you the work. Right. After a year of that, I wanted to go into the job force and I found it really hard. And this is where I'm kind of a mentor and a coach these days, trying to coach young artists to get into the workforce and learn from my mistakes and learn from my learnings. And in this sense, I found it super hard to get in. You didn't get responses from employers, blah, 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 blah. But there were these other opportunities that I saw arise from certain studios. So Animal Logic, which is a big studio here in Australia, which did, the Lego movies, Peter Rabbit most recently. They were doing some training programs, but it wasn't in 3D. It was in actually Roto and Comp Assist. So, but I thought, and my attitude's always been, like, if you haven't tried something, try it. So it was 4 weeks free education. I jumped in. The beauty of it, and what I learned in hindsight, and only in hindsight do you see the path you've traveled, right, and know what you've learned along the way. The beauty of it was that I was now in a creative hub. I was with like-minded people. I had my foot inside a huge animation house and film house, learning Roto, which, again, in hindsight, it helped me out. But at the time, I knew I really wanted to do 3D animation as well. That was my passion. But by jumping into this studio, I was able to do work and show that, hey, I can do work. I can work hard. I can work in a team. Collaboration is key, soft skills. Not being a dick, kind of. I'm sorry for swearing on your podcast, sorry, but not being, being a good employer is important, and those things aren't, the technical and the button pushing and doing beautiful models is one thing, but a big thing that I've seen in my career is actually being a good employer and being a good teammate. Yeah. So through that, I was able to then push my passion. Now I was in this area where people were 9 to 6. I was doing Roto on a movie, and I was offered a role in a movie after that training. But now I was in the industry, and I could then go home, do my animations. Animation was my passion, and bring them in and show now animators, because they were just down the hall, right? And you do that humbly as well. It's about approaching them in the kitchen and say, "Oh, I love animation. Would you like to look at my animations?" And I was able to surround myself now by mentors and people, because most of us artists, I'm sure you're the same, Ryan, we're always happy to help. we're always happy to look at other people's work and give critiques and feedback. Of course, there's a level we can't do it, 24 hours a day, but it doesn't take much to look at a student's work and offer them some advice. And the same with these mentors. So they did that for me. I was then able to, I was on the radar now for being someone who was keen to animate. And I was learning from some really great animators. So after a year of doing Roto, which again, I bring this up because you got to earn your stripes too. You also got to, before you go to that glorious role of the role that you think your dream job, you got to actually, there's a rite of passage there, man. You got to earn those stripes. So when then my contract was coming up on that comp side of things, the 2D side, my supervisor, animators around, they had noticed my passion for animation. So they were willingly to now say, oh, well, look, we're looking for people in that department. And then they moved me over because they saw keenness. And I was able to navigate over into a 3D department. There, I started off doing layout first, and again, this is something I could talk for ages about. So please just stop me if I'm going on for too long. But now you're in the layout department where you're learning 3D. There was a lot of downtime, but I had access to now relevant rigs for the productions they were doing. So I could play with those rigs, animate those rigs, again, get feedback, show the animation leads, show animation directors. And when they were looking for junior animators, instead of looking outside, they knew they had someone inside who was keen and who already was familiar with the style of the show and all that. So they moved me in, and it took me like a good 2 years, but then I navigated into a junior animation position. So that was my journey as an animator, how I got into that. Again, the key takeaways there for the students who are listening is I always feel, and this is what I was telling Natalie a bit, is just do what you have to do to get into that nest, which is the creative hub in a studio. And from there, you will escalate your career much faster than sitting on the outside and waiting for like that dream job.
But that's one of the problems that I think is out there, right? Because there's a lot of people that would be like, yeah, shit, yeah, I'll do anything. And you got in literally at, like the bottom, Roto. Is that what I understood?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's like one of the first jobs to get outsourced because it's, that's a lot of mouse jock. Your wrists, it's pretty hardcore. Yeah. And so, that's right in there. But the same kind of thing doesn't exist necessarily in the game industry, per se. And today it's actually a little bit different too, because in Roto, like you said about 10 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So it's now much more global, I think.
Yeah. So in terms of the game side of things, I would say there's still junior positions to strive after. And so conversations I often have with people who are modelers, they want to be character modelers. And I feel, sure, that's great. And I don't want to, you shouldn't squash those dreams. You should keep those passions alive and always character model. But if you want to get into a game studio, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, I feel that environment modelers are more sought after to begin with. And I would say there's more junior environment modeler positions than there are junior character modeler positions. So already there, you're setting yourself up like, mathematically, if there's only, let's say, one character junior artist job for every 10, well, there's the ratio 1 to 10, right? And to increase your chances, again, let's say it's like playing the lotto. I want 10 numbers in the lotto. I don't want that one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's stories with people who started off as runners. Do you know what I mean? Don't worry about that first year. What I would say is get in. I've known people who got into film industry by making coffee first. And then 3 days a week, they did coffee runs and all this, boring, mundane stuff. But then 2 days a week, they were given a box and were able to, again, surround themselves by artists that could inspire them and could teach them. And they're now senior lighters, traveling the world. And it took them a couple of years, but everybody has a different journey. And what I try to do in my role as a mentor is trying to open young artists' minds and kind of make them think a bit wide, look outside the box kind of thing. Hey, there's other ways to get into the industry. There's something there though where and this is dangerous, is that you get pigeonholed, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the things that I was going to get on, because it does seem like there's more jobs for environment, but then do you get pigeonholed? And then one of the strangest things I've encountered, and it might just be because of my background leans towards character, but I noticed that the character artists in my game art program, that's actually one of the higher employed sides of it. A touch more than environment. Yeah. Even though environment I know has more jobs out there, but that's one of the weird things that I'm noticing. So part of it also is like, how do artists prepare themselves and train themselves? Because each one of these industries, each one of these jobs has its own kind of difficulties. And tell me what you think on this front. But let's say if it's if it's 5 years ago, even 5 years ago, like before some of the PBR stuff and even some of the tech stuff, and then especially with some of the stuff like Stadia, sorry, the games and all the stuff, you had to be very low res. So there's a lot of modelers just optimizing things. But nowadays, it seems like the most important thing isn't the low res, it's the high res.
Yeah, so it's much higher fidelity we're seeing these days. When Unity and Unreal both are trying to push real time into film, and make that. Yeah. That's how we want to make films in real time.
And as we do that, both sides of that equation need to get better at what they do. Like character artists need to be better at anatomy, and prop and environment need to be better at lighting and understanding modeling things.
So what I say to that is always be learning. This industry is constantly reinventing itself. We're always inventing new technologies that are going to empower us and make us push the board. And we can never be content and placid in the way that we were taught, because the tools that we were taught in now, 3 years' time, might not be redundant. They might be redundant. However, the fundamentals behind it are going to be key. And so you always got to stay on the cusp. And that's kind of what pushes me into the way that we teach here as well, by jumping into emerging technologies. And it pushes me into the research that I do on the side as well. Like I'm focused on mixed reality and storytelling in that vein, because I see a huge opportunity there that, how do we tell stories with these new devices? So always be learning is key. And that's something I tell my students too, is like, you're going to learn you're going to be learning from 9 to 6, right? Let's say on a standard day. But anybody who's anything in this industry, and I'm sure you did the same, Ryan, you worked your butt off after hours and through the night. Do you know what I mean? Because it was a passion, and because it's something that we love doing. And my quote, which I don't know, it's probably not true, but I made this one up, is like, Picasso didn't paint from 9 to 5. Stevie Wonder wouldn't compose music from 9 to 5. Michael Jordan wasn't in the gym from 9 to 5. These guys who are masters in their craft, were gym rats, or they kept learning and they kept improving themselves outside the standard hours. And that passion and that motivation, that they fuel each other, and those are key. So you kind of have to have that as well.
And I did a lot of research on this a while back, a couple of years ago. And one of the things that came out that was a little odd was painters, sculptors, like they're known for going into the studio. You go into the studio and you just work in the studio. But then writers have a max capacity per day. And it was odd because it was like 3 to 5 hours tops. The top writers out there, that's the most productivity they can have in any one given day. They can sit down for 3 hours. That's good. Everything beyond 3 hours, pure crap. But you hear of stories of Picasso and, late nights, and then Lucian Freud had a really renowned work ethic, just hours upon hours. But you couldn't do anything in CG for 3 hours a day.
No, I could barely open Maya.
Yeah, right. You barely closed the program.
Yeah.
So, it changed with us, which is an interesting note of what the tech does to us and to our process as artists. But it does take a lot more than just an 8-hour day for us, regardless of the past mediums, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with that. And in terms of the writer's side of thing, I mean, it's a whole different, it's much different than the tech pushy side of things. Sitting down and writing, you often hear about the, writer's block and all that stuff. But I only think there's like 2 or 3 hours in a day where they really get into the flow of things.
Yep.
And it's about engaging with that flow. And we know it when we sit down and you guys sit down and model, and you're just in the rhythm and you just know it and you just don't want to stop, right? Because you're hitting it. And there is research behind that, where your mind, you hit this certain aspect, which they actually do call the flow. And with writing, I've done a bit of that on the side as well. It is much harder because you just get stuck in different areas. I mean, it must use a different part of the brain without me knowing, like, deep diving too much into that.
So I checked out this War Tile game. What did you do on the War Tile?
So War Tile was the lead animator. So I was there. So this is with some friends back in Copenhagen. Originally, I'm from Denmark and Copenhagen. And these guys approached me, and I ran the animation side of that. So it was pretty much, I had a little team of animators remotely, and I ran just the animation performance side of that. So we were animating rigs in Maya and then exporting them FBX so they could bring them into Unreal.
That's cool. I like that. Yeah, it's a really interesting game concept.
It's really cool. And again, moving further, it would be an amazing thing to put into not just VR, but augmented reality as well. Like being able to interact with your fingers and lift these so it became like a digital board game.
Digital
that's something
Dungeons
that
and Dragons, you know,
absolutely
right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So from your perspective, what kind of job openings are out there? Let's just start in a generic way, and then I want to get a little bit more granular in terms of how people prepare. But just from your perspective, like what are the kind of job opportunities out there for just 3D artists, not thinking game or film, just 3D artists?
So for 3D artists starting out, already like without actually surveying the American games market enough, I know from my side of the world and in film, junior positions are already a dime a dozen, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's not like in a place like Animal Logic, which is a big studio, it'll hire up to 500 people a day. I mean, you're looking at maybe 10 juniors in there. So already there as a starting out artist, how do you get that first break? It's very competitive. So in those tents, again, they run some amazing programs in match moving. They still do the roto because they don't outsource their roto. Actually, roto is a huge benefit for anybody who wants to be a compositor. So build themselves in. That's a really good foundation to have to be able to roto. Mm-hmm. And then there's also, they're doing some char effect stuff. So Houdini, again, this is very film relevant. So I'm sorry for, I know this is games. Again, but I still think the same is true when you go into like a game studio. There's not going to be that many junior positions. So again, modeling seems to be the thing that's that's the most popular. And animation is, of course, a popular craft as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know where to go other than mentioning that junior positions are a dime a dozen already. So what do you do to get one of those junior positions? I'm happy to jump into that if you're ready to talk about that conversation.
Just looking at on what you do, there's AR, there's VR, there's game, there's film.
Yes.
And so how do beginning artists interact with those kinds of jobs? It's kind of where I'm wanting to see if I can get granular. Because, for example, I think a lot of your work, you joined Animal Logic, and Animal Logic just did a lot of different stuff, right?
No, that's not true, though, because Animal Logic do mainly film.
Okay.
Right. So, and from that, I touched 2D, which is the comp side of things, and then went into 3D. So they don't do any AR, VR stuff. So that first happened when I started freelancing and breaking out a bit into then doing these game apps. I touched a bit of Wartile. That's when I got familiar a bit with Unreal and real-time engines. I did a Talking Tom running game app with some guys, Outfit 7, I believe, they're in Budapest. And then I got a bit familiar with Unity through that. So just seeing that there's these other, again, always be learning, these other programs out there, and they're free to use. You know, Unreal you can grab for free, Unity you can grab for free. It's really about jumping in and deep diving into those things and just trying to bring a model in, a rig model in, and getting it animated in a real-time environment and exposing yourself to this new technology. I feel that's key because right now there's not many jobs, again, also in the VR, AR space. That's something that's going to happen. It's slowly growing, but we're not there yet. I think that's like, we're still like 4 or 5 years into that when you're going to see a boom in studios specializing in that stuff.
What do you think are the factors that are going to increase that?
When these devices become more consumer ready. So like from GDC now, they've just announced I think there was there's some $400 headsets coming out, which are pretty powerful, but that's fine. You get a $400 headset. It's still a bit pricey, right? Most people probably buy a PlayStation before they do that, potentially. But there's a $400 headset, but then you also need a good machine to run it, right? So you're looking at expenses which are, maybe like $1,500 to $2,000 easily. And that's not consumer friendly. So there's not enough people latching onto this stuff. It's only when the prices are become, again, it goes back to when Apple come out with their headset. I think you're going to see a rise in people, like the Apple Watch, almost everybody's got one except for me, but everybody's got an iPhone or a smartphone. Once they are consumer available and consumers can buy these things at a decent price, that's when you'll see studios then saying, all right, we got to get on this. Now, some studios are already on it and smart enough doing it, but a lot of the stuff that is being done in VR right now is training stuff. It's like exhibition stuff. It's like for rides and theme parks. And that's where they're getting good clients and they're making some money on it. Yeah. It's not really the games that are going on Steam or Viveport. That's not really driving their businesses at the moment. So
have you seen the new, I don't know if they have this in your part of the world, but in over here, the theme parks. So yes. Disney's old school theme park, it's the rides and all of that. And then you go over to Universal, and Universal's gone full on, put the glasses on, and you're in these like VR, AR kind of setups.
Yes. There's some cool ones over here as well. You've got one over there, I think it's called The Void. Is that correct?
I don't know
or is that here? Anyway, there's a few. I'd have to look them up. So, but there are where you go in and it's like laser tag, right?
Yeah.
Everybody gets a backpack, they get a VR headset, and you can walk around these open warehouse environments. The beauty there is it's and you pay probably like, I wouldn't know, I haven't tried them yet to be honest, but you probably pay like $80 a pop really for 30 minutes. But the experience you get is that Ready Player One type vibe. You're stepping into a complete different world. And the smart ones, they actually map the 3D environment out to the tangible warehouse environment around you. So when you do touch a wall, you actually touch the wall. And I've seen some go as far as, and there's one in Utah and there's one in New York, like there's a Ghostbusters one as well. Okay. And where they put down strings. When you walk through these strings, like there's just strings in real life, but in VR, it's a web, right? So you're playing on the senses, right? Which is the power of VR, is that full immersion. So there's those. Yeah, it would freak you out. And, VR is not for everyone either. Like people get nauseated really quickly. So you have that issue as well, which you can't solve that because that's a biological difference. Some people get car sick, some people don't. And VR does that. So you're already there. VR is kind of cutting down possible clients. Mm-hmm. And that's where something like mixed reality, the HoloLens Magic Leap, is a beautiful kind of bridge where you still have reality around you, but you've got 3D characters walking around, actually map into your environment, interacting with your environment. And that stuff is that's where we're going, I feel. And again, huge call for game artists in that area because it's gamifying experiences. And whether it's a training program or a medical program or a rehabilitation program for a medical sector, they need artists, and they will need artists who can create models for real time, which in fact is games. So,
well, along those lines, why do animators get all the credit? I've been wondering about this for a while.
Because we're very outspoken and we're prima donnas. I'll be the first to admit that. But at the same time, it's also people's ignorance is not a good word, but they don't know. Like when people come and they look at a Pixar movie, they say, "Oh, that was an amazing animation." And when they say animation, what they mean is everything. Where when you break it down, the way I have to break animation down to my wife or my in-laws is I'm a puppeteer. So I take Kermit the Frog as an example. I hope people know who Kermit the Frog is. I know you do, but the generation, we might be missing out on some Sesame Street Muppet Show here, the younger youths. But Kermit, you guys make modelers. You guys make Kermit the Frog, right? Then you got riggers. They put the sticks in for Kermit the Frog. I put my hand up him and move his mouth and move the sticks and give him, life. And that's the best way I found to break down what an animator is. And a modeler, then you got texture artists, gives him his green color. Designers before that draw him up, and so on and so forth.
And the Oscar is named after you guys. What is that all about?
Oh, see, this is again, Look, I don't want to go into Oscar talk, but there's a lot of politics behind the Oscars, which I have my opinions, and they're great. It's good to see Spider-Verse win. What a fantastic movie! So shout out to all.
Wasn't it? That was unreal.
It's unreal. Like and we needed it. We needed something fresh, new, and it's groundbreaking. That is absolutely.
I think that's probably that's the only film I've seen in a long time I'd put that phrase to. Like Matrix is groundbreaking.
Yes. Yeah. Terminator 2, Jurassic Park.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the big ones. But then there was that one where the guy forgets a lot, and I thought the storytelling on that was
Memento.
Like that just blew my mind for some reason.
Absolutely. Yeah.
In terms of the storytelling.
Absolutely.
But the visuals, like the way Spider-Verse worked, it had that whole chromatic aberration, and it was just crazy.
Comic book effect. And when I love all these articles that are coming out now, which again, it was from the guys that I know who worked on it, that said it was the hardest slog ever because they were reinventing the wheel, basically, how to approach this stuff. However, they put in the hours and they put into work and they created a masterpiece. And the credit to all the visuals, it's great, but the story on its own holds up without that too. You know what I mean? It was a really inspiring story, and like I've got kids, and I've got 3 kids, and it was just a pleasure to watch a story which was so empowering and just so unique in its own way. So, but the visuals on top of that Man, I've watched it like 4 times, so I'm ready to watch it again right now, to be honest.
That's great. Yeah, I didn't buy it, but I think after this conversation, I'll go buy it. I got to get that. Yeah, it's too good.
Doubt.
So why don't you tell me, what do you think students need to do, and people who are just starting out need to do? What do they have to put in their portfolio? Because we're both in agreement. Portfolio is really the only thing that matters.
The portfolio is going to get you the look in, and it's going to get you the interview, right? So what I look at in portfolios as well, so your CV is key too. Don't undersell yourself. If you know some coding, if you've worked at McDonald's, these things are actually key in a CV. So let's start with the CV there. Like if you've worked a quote unquote, I call them shit jobs, but they're actually the hard jobs. Something which is customer facing. If you've worked a bar, McDonald's, at a store, checking groceries, that tells me that you can work in a team. You can be told what to do, and you've got like resilience in that area, in those soft skills.
Yeah, any one of those jobs will teach you resilience.
And resilience is key, man, because you walk into the studio, that's what you need. And because people are going to tell you, and this is something we teach at the academy too, is not to take it personally when people give you feedback. Because we don't have time to sugarcoat feedback. You know, a supervisor doesn't have time to say, oh, this was really nice. They're going to go, fix this, fix this, fix this. And it's really brutal as a junior artist to walk into something like that and walk out and without taking it personally. 90% of the times you take that personally. However, you've worked in those McDonald's areas. You've dealt with customers who aren't happy and unsatisfied. You've already got yourself a bit of resilience in that area. So put those things on your CV. Don't talk about them elaborately. You just need to mention I worked for McDonald's from here to here, because I'm sure that they will bring it up in an interview if you get that. Now, and the same with coding and stuff like that. Don't forget how important the technology behind the tools we use is. So if you've got some C#, C++, some Python skills in you, make sure you mention that, because they could look at you as a technical artist. That could be the tipping point. Like you might have two girls who are even, right? Two artists who are even keel, but this one has a bit of coding. That could tip you in the scales of, we only have room for one. And so for your portfolio as a modeler, in my time, I did model when I was starting out. However, I didn't get a job as a model. I have never worked, but I've worked with plenty. And what I've been told and what I've seen is showing diversity. So you don't want to just do full characters. I reckon not just a lineup of full characters. If you are doing characters, don't do dragons. Don't do elvish characters. This is what I've just been told as well. So because you want to do something that you can do a one-to-one relation to. Like if you start doing something which is fantastical, like fantasy, there's nothing to compare it to other, because you can be subjective and say, well, that's what I designed it to look like, right? Versus being able to show that, hey, here is Brad Pitt. Take an image from Brad Pitt and Fury. Can you model that one-to-one? Now you're showing an employer, and you're showing a lead, hey, he understands exactly how to hit something one-to-one. There's a direct comparison there. Similarly with environments, an old leather boot. If you can take a picture of an old leather boot and you can model that right next to it, and it's a one-to-one comparison, A over B, and it's just like, whoa. Even if it's not 100% there, but it's 90% there, they can see potential in your skill and in your work. So those are the things. And then showing diversity, have some hard surface, have some organic. If you are truly just character focused, again, I don't want to stop that. But like I was saying earlier, I just feel like you're already you're chopping down possibilities there to get into a studio, because there's less character jobs. However, like you said, your students are having more success in that area. So, there could be so many factors to that. Yeah.
So it sounds like the way that you are approaching this is make sure that you're as cover your bases, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so one of the concerns that comes up in my brain is if you're versatile, how do you dive deep?
Yeah.
But
we're talking just from a modeling standpoint?
Well, like you could say modeling or whatnot. Because like, for example, let's say when I was going to school, back when the PCs couldn't even run the software. The machines were like those Indigos. They cost like $100,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
So if you could model like a cup, you had a job as a character artist. They had nobody. But now with so many people out in the industry, with it being so hard, how do you distinguish yourself if you're going to cover all the bases? That's, I think, the rub. That's the hard part. And it sounds like you do that. But the question is how if I'm going to cover my bases, how do I still dive deep or at least put myself in a position to be above, everybody else?
Everybody else. That's a good question. The one thing I would break down now, and I saw Laura ask, well, if you're just talking from a modeling standpoint, then I think it's fine to diversify within modeling, right? You can do character, you can do environment, you can do hard surface, you can do organic and soft, right? Yes. It's going to be a hustle and you're going to have to work hard to do that, but you can do that. That's achievable. However, if you want to be a generalist as in a 3D, like you want to animate, rig, model, surface, light, that's when I say, no. You got to specialize. But again, it does depend on what studios you are targeting. Are you going to go work with a 5-man indie studio? Well, then it's great to have these skills where you can jump around and be flexible. Are you going to go work with, let's say on the next Red Dead Redemption? I'm pretty sure you need to specialize as you're either an environment modeler or you're a character modeler. And you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Ryan, or you're an animator or you're a surfacer. Do you know what I mean? So it depends on the studios that you're navigating yourself towards and where you want to end up. In big feature film, you have to specialize, but that's not specializing within modeling. I think modeling, you still need to be able to show a range of diversity within that. So for the guys who are doing your character course, my advice would be keep pushing characters for sure, but don't neglect doing a bit of environments for this character to be in. Like, I love those little dioramas that tell a story a little. And for the guys who are doing the environment stuff, don't neglect the characters. And then don't neglect the organic side and the hard surface side, et cetera, within that.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point because one of the things that happens with character people, myself included, we just kind of, like I just love to sculpt naked people. Like, if that's the only thing I could, if I could get away with that, that's all I would do. It's just
absolutely.
Go sculpt a whole bunch of naked people and be like, this is my life. But in games, you got to do Marvelous Designer. You got to texture all that stuff. So you got to be into Substance Painter. And if you go deeper, it's Designer, but not necessarily for character. And then you work from there. So what kind of software do you think is important? Because when I was talking to Natalie about all this, she mentioned things like Katana and a couple of different things.
So that's film-based, Katana, highly film. Again, your students are very game focused. So I would say you need to understand an engine, like get your head around Unity, Unreal, most likely one of the two, if not both. But no, you don't need to have a deep dive understanding unless you're kind of like a coder and a developer at the back end. But being able to bring your models in and understanding how these systems work so you can work with people in that vein. And in terms of the software stack, I mean, Substance is the one to go with right now. Substance Painter for texturing, and like you said, Designer, particularly for environments, like being able to create your own substance, your own materials is key. Maya seems to be the standard software stack, and as a modeler, you're probably going to want ZBrush as well. Be able to jump back and forth between those two. I don't know, what do you use in that area? You're a ZBrush user when you sculpt?
Me, No, I since I helped develop ZBrush, I can't bring myself.
There you go.
I can't bring myself to touch the program, which shall not be named.
Yes, sorry for naming it. But that's the thing. It's like you also want to keep it, a bit of like, for me, the way we treat our projects in the studio and in any studio, if possible, we select the best software for the project's needs.
Yeah.
Of course, that's a very expensive approach, but that's a very nice, holistic kind of. That's the ideal world. With film, we were using Mari to start with, but then Substance made this huge run. So we jumped onto Substance. Also because when we jump into real time, that's going to benefit us big time, when we cross into the gamified projects that we do.
Oh, so even in film, you're getting into Substance now.
Absolutely. Substance is making a push in film. Yeah, it's
I saw that. I just didn't know if it'd taken root yet. So that's great.
No. So slowly effects houses are still using it. I mean, we are going to look at without character, because you can get a bit more high fidelity and like close up with characters and go into a bit more detail with Mari still. So we're in a beautiful spot where we can use both. But I think, as long as Adobe having both algorithmic now don't mess it up, Substance is making a push,
Yeah, 3D is not Adobe's thing, so it's going to be interesting.
It's going to be interesting. But I've heard that the Substance creator has been given kind of free reins again. Now I'm saying this live, but I don't know. But I hope that's the case. I've been on the forum reading. Yeah,
and having worked in software at probably one of the leading innovators out there, like I was there from ZBrush 2 to ZBrush 3.5. And that's hard to build a company that does that and innovates. Pixelogic was able to do it because they had funds.
Yeah.
They had a backer. Some of these events, like if you go to back then, if you went to SIGGRAPH, it was over $100,000. To go to put a booth up. That's crazy money. So that they've got some funding, because how they survived and how they grew is that's a marvel. Whoever ran that, i.e. the founder, and so to have him move over and start to head up Adobe is very, to me, encouraging, because that's a hard thing to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of ZBrush, now that you're on the topic, when are you guys going to come to Linux?
Yeah, right. I don't know. I have nothing to do with them anymore.
Okay.
My days with them are over. But I don't see that happening too soon.
I think they're on top of their game. You know what I mean? So they don't.
Yeah, they're very consumer centric, because that's where their money is. Yeah. And whereas Autodesk can be a little bit on the engineer centric side of it, or the producer side, Pixo is very consumer driven. Always has been. Yeah. So that's software. Now, what do you think are some of one of the ways that I build the bootcamp is around the idea that it's not important, and it sounds like you guys, you have a similar philosophy to this a bit, but it's not important for you to know everything.
Exactly.
You don't have to be a master of Maya. Who the hell's a master of Maya?
Nobody.
Nobody. The program is crazy deep, right?
Yeah.
It's took me 3 months just to feel even remotely comfortable. I opened up ZBrush. It took me a weekend.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, then it's all you got to know about anatomy and form. So from my perspective, it's not about being a master. It's about, if you're looking for a job, just what are the triggers that tell somebody you can do the job, and what are the triggers that tell you can't? So when somebody looks at when I look at anatomy, within 3 seconds, I know exactly where their anatomy level is.
Yeah.
Look at their elbows, look at their wrists. Everything you need to know. Mm-hmm. And the forearm. If you see their forearm muscle, that'll tell me everything I need to know about their ability. So what are some of the triggers that, from your perspective, tell people they're employable? In film, in games, in whatever. Don't matter.
In life in general. It's to see, so what I like to see is potential, right? Because I believe that if you come into the environment, if you come into the culture, into the studio, you will learn, we'll gauge you on that potential, and we'll make it an assessment saying, all right, if we bring you in, you're going to grow artistically, creatively, technically. That's fine. The key is to gauge those soft skills, because you might have all this great potential, but if you're impossible to work with, if you can't take feedback on it, you're going to make it a hard time. We have this philosophy again, it's called just don't be a dick, right? Yeah. I've seen rock star artists, great animators, great artists, never be invited back onto a production again because they were toxic to work with. So the key is collaboration, and that's something that we really push here. And it's a hard one, because I'd love to focus on the creative more so, but I find that over 50% of my time, I'm actually more of a psychologist. I'm more so, I'm dealing with people's differences. Yeah. We're from all walks of life. We have different opinions. We're brought up differently. And how do we come together? Luckily, I was a big fan and played basketball for all my life. And that's a great analogy. Team sports is, you can come from anywhere, but once you get within those lines and the basketball goes up in the air, you need to work together. You need to find synergy, and race, color, religion, differences, all that is just blown away, and you're there, and you're a team. Same thing as when you're trying to finish a project or game or film or anything like that. You need to be able to compromise your beliefs and differences. And I'm not telling people to change, because that's the last thing we want to do. I want people to be independent. However, people do have a choice. And if you don't feel like this is an environment for you, and this could also go back to the pigeonholing thing. If you feel like you're being pigeonholed, you always have that option of humbly just saying, hey, this isn't for me, and resigning. I've resigned from jobs before, humbly, and they'll have me back on another project, because I wasn't happy, because I wasn't getting what I felt I needed out of this job. And if you're not happy, if you're not comfortable, if you're not experiencing joy every day, well, that's a problem. That's something that we have to create these environments where people actually are enjoying their work, because the work will shine through that. So get back to your point, it's gauging potential. In animation, I'm looking at, do they understand weight shifting? Is there timing and spacing? all the fundamentals in there. It doesn't have to be great. It doesn't have to be polished, especially not at this level, because we're teaching an academy here, right? So when we're looking at people coming into the academy, it's at a junior level, right? Because my job is to get them out there as a high functioning junior, like a lower mid would be the key for us. When they come a year and spend a year with us, they come out the other end and they're overachieving juniors, to be honest. But seeing that potential in whatever craft. So when it comes to surfacing, lighting, like we've even looked at people they come to us and they haven't touched 3D, and they've done oil canvas paintings and light studies in traditional art. But we'll see a potential there. It's like, wow, imagine putting this person into lighting or into substance. Imagine the textures they could give on some of these projects. And we'll then interview the person and talk about, this is where we think you should go. If you want to transfer these skills, again, transferable skills from a traditional foundation like oil painting and canvas painting to 3D, we'll give you our advice. If you think that's great and you want to take that on board and pursue that, then we kind of have some questions in line that gauge your attitude and gauge your soft skills. Because that, to me, that is the key. Of course, you can't be a shit artist, right? You have to show some potential. But as long as you can see that in whatever discipline it is you choose, I find that's really important.
What do you think are some of the keys to communicating? How do you make yourself like receptive?
Receptive. That's you are. Okay, so the keys to doing that, like exposing yourself. So go to some of these meetups, go to events, like there's conferences all the time. Go and break that mold. Like the problem with us artists, right? We are introverts. We do love sitting in front of a screen for hours on end, right? And there's very little social interaction when we're sitting at home, like working on our portfolio. So being able to break up and go to these events and go and talk to people, like online forums, that doesn't count. I'm sorry. You need really personal.
Yeah, it's not a social life.
Yes, well, some of us are extroverts, Laura. Absolutely. But online, online keyboard bashing is not a social life. And playing video games, even though I love doing that and getting online with mates, and that's still not, that eye-to-eye contact is key. Just talk to somebody face to face and have discussions. That comes with practice and experience.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I think some people will think I'm a bit of an extrovert because I do videos and I've been doing videos for a while. Like we did this ad where I had my face on the boot camp and one of my partners was in the studio and it went live on ArtStation. And all these guys are like, oh, Ryan, he's like this, he's always out there. But I don't go to a lot of events. I'm very much of an introvert. I don't go out and meet a ton of people. I don't hit GDC up. I don't hit any of these things up. I kind of prefer to live in my little castle on the hill, which is kind of a castle on the hill here in Laguna Beach. And, that's nice. But you're right. You do need to learn how to make eye contact, which I think is one of the key things.
Yeah, interpersonal skills. So like if you get a job interview, you need to actually, as much as shaking someone's hand walking in the door. Right. And acknowledging everybody in that room. Don't just sit and stare at one person. Don't just sit and stare down at your feet. You need to be able to look at people and talk to them because they're gauging that stuff.
Totally.
You're there for a reason. They're there because your work has intrigued them. Now you're there to kind of show, hey, is this someone we can work with? Is this someone who we can get along? Or will this person come in and feel totally like out of home and not be able to work at its best? Again, it's when you're creating these teams, you're trying to create a healthy, fun, collaborative environment.
That's an interesting note because that's all. For me, a key part of it is because the primary job I have, the way I see my job is I just make job candidates. That's it. I like to tell people if you want a guaranteed job, it does kind of exist. It's not in art. You got to go be a programmer. If you need the job, programmer, 1 million unmet jobs by 2020. So they say, I've done some programming and I'm not a human when I program. It's like I'd be divorced. That's just, it changes your emotional tone. It's kind of addictive. But, at the end of that, we want to be artists. We want to do this. We want to live, our life, kind of live life on our terms, so to speak. That's kind of our goal, right?
That's key.
So if I was walking into a job interview and I wanted to, quote unquote, own the room, if I wanted to give everybody the feeling that I was capable, because part of it is our art. We think it's our art, but that's a small part of it.
Yes.
The other part's like what you're talking about. You want to give that soft skill. And so if we were to say what we want is we want to own that room, what do we have to do? What do we do to make that happen?
So there's keys, and like, come on, like we have to also be serious. You're going to be nervous, but walking into the room, you shake their hands, you acknowledge everybody. What I'd like to tell my artists when they go out, do some research. Usually you'll know who's going to be in that room. There's going to be an email saying such and such is such and such. They're going to be there. It doesn't take you long. Take yourself a couple hours, research who they are, what have they worked on, kind of make note of that, because they might have worked on a movie that you really loved, and there will be a moment there where you can mention that. They might have worked with somebody who you know. You just don't know. So you should always kind of research is key. And that's the same. And this goes back to actually the job ads too. You need to research your job ads. Don't just read them, study them. The answers are in between those lines. They're asking you specific questions there. If you can answer all of them and add, for example, that you have programming knowledge or whatever, or that you love, let's say for Peter Rabbit, that you have you're fixated about birds, or that you love Legos. Those things are tipping points. They can make you actually, oh, this guy's totally entrenched. He loves Legos, and we're doing Lego Movie 7. Well, let's bring him in, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So, but back to the room, when you walk in, it's okay to say, I'm a bit nervous. Just let them know, because they'll know, right? Instead of sitting there fidgeting, you just let them know. And then once you've said that, you're going to feel more at ease, because then you've taken that one off your list, off your mind, saying, okay, oh, what if they think I'm nervous, blah, 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 blah. No, just let them know I'm nervous. It's okay. They'll say it's okay, and then they'll talk. The key then is to acknowledge everybody in the room, talk to them. You got to be ready to talk about your work. You can do some research about the project that you're potentially being hired for as well. So if you've got, let's say it's a car game, whatever, the next Gran Turismo or Forza 8, then you want to talk about your interest in cars and blah, 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 blah. Like, you want to cater yourself to that forum. And, I can harp on and say, just be confident, but confidence isn't that easy. That comes with practice. Mm-hmm. So what you could do is do practice interviews. You could practice interview with people and set up these scenarios. And then something that we do, role play is something we do when we prototype our VR, AR experiences. Like at a very early stage, before even getting in and making it, we role play our experience. So one person acts as the AI, as the computer, and then one person pretends he's in VR, and then he'll say, okay, so what if I do this? I'm trying to do this. What does this do? And then the AI will say, well, that doesn't do anything. Or that will open this door, or that will do that. And so already before you're jumping into creating this stuff and putting in the hard hours and labor into it, you've actually found out and outlined some key areas that you actually need to work on. So back to the interview is the same thing. I would say you can practice interview with people, go to events, or try to go to places where you're actually forced to kind of mingle a bit as well. Because that stuff makes it easier. It's only through, experience is your best master, right? Or is your best teacher. There's an old saying. So it's only by going through it. And, there's a saying, fail often, fail fast. I believe that's true as well. You're only going to learn from your mistakes. Like, if we live too sheltered a life and always are thinking, what if, that's just a what if. It's still it's just a hypothetical. Go out and meet it. And you're actually going to find out that, hey, I can do this. So yeah, dusting off cobwebs, that kind of thing, building resilience. And that comes through practice. So you can simulate those environments. They'll never be the real thing. But there's a lot of little tips that I give the people I mentor to get ready for job interviews and stuff. And they seem to work all right.
Cool. I have had a therapist once, like a real, genuine therapist. When I was younger, I followed Ayn Rand a lot. And one of the people that was in that, she's a writer back in the day, Atlas Shrugged and Fountainhead. But there was a guy who was a part of that, a psychologist. His name is Nathaniel Branden, used to write on self-esteem. And I don't know how I did it, but I ended up, I just had to learn from this guy. So I went and I was his patient for a while. And one of the things that he told me was, when you walk into a room and you need to perform, so to speak, one of the things he said was, pay attention to every detail that you can. Mm-hmm. Try to notice everything.
Yeah.
And from his perspective, he was thinking, like, one of the things that happens when we get nervous is we narrow our focus, and that causes problems. So if you can counteract that and just become aware of everything and just notice the color of the floor, not be looking around all crazy but just be noticing and stuff. It's quite powerful or empowering.
Yeah, absolutely. That takes practice, man. And like, therapy is practice as well. You're training your mind to do something that you're not used to, breaking bad habits, et cetera, et cetera. And there's something also that we go through here at the Academy. Like, we really focus on that collaboration, soft skills a lot. And one of the things is reading the room, right?
Yeah.
being able to read a room, and that just comes with, well, we share all our anecdotes that we've made, like we've had throughout the years, but being able to sit in, like, let's say a daily session. For those of you who don't know what daily sessions are, that's when everybody sits together and watches the work that artists have done, and a supervisor and a director are there giving notes, and you're learning from other people's notes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But knowing what to do and how to read the room, is this a forum where everybody has a say, or is this a forum where, no, it's just the director and the lead talking and you're listening? And I've seen people burn in those sessions because they think, oh, they can just speak about everybody's work. No, that's not the case. And it's about, again, if you're in a job interview, you need to be able to still like read the room. Where is this conversation going? What are they asking? There's body language stuff. There's all sorts of stuff that comes into play, which at a higher level, you can learn to master. But I wouldn't expect first like junior artists coming out to master that. I would say don't worry about that stuff. That will come. But worry about eye contact, doing a bit of research, shaking someone's hand properly is key. Letting them know that you're nervous. All those things are, and being prepared to talk about your work, speak about your work, the processes behind your work, and being prepared to talk about the project you're going for. Those things are really key. Yeah. So Gus, somebody wants an answer here. So do you see a difference between self-taught artists versus those who spend 2 or 3 years in a 3D school? So I do see a difference there. But again, my quirky remark is it does depend on the school, because some schools out there, again, that's why we've established the academy in the way we have done as well. It's industry led. It's led by people who actually have experience. Whereas some schools, they have, students from the year before teaching. That's a common kind of thread that happens in a lot of schools. And there's still stuff to be gained there. If you haven't touched a 3D program, that's a good way to get foundational skills in Maya or whatever. But the difference is self-taught, you're usually in a singular, isolated environment. And this plays back into the soft skills. We have some amazing artists here this year in the academy, and they're ready to work in the industry. However, they've been self-taught and they have no social skills. And that's what they're here to learn. They're here to learn to collaborate, of course, and build their technical skills. But I have no concern about that. Like, these guys will be leads if they master. They'll be leads and supervisors one day if they master those soft skills, as we call them. And no, you don't have to be Sherlock when you go to those interviews. Again, let me just rephrase that. Like, as a junior, you're not expected to go in there and read the room. However, it takes you an hour to do some research on the people who are going to be in that room with you, and you're going to be so much better equipped. You know what I mean? And those are the small tangibles that can get you ahead. Another hint that I might as well drop while we're on that: look at your peers and people around you who have successfully gained entry into junior positions. You can reach out to those guys, and you can look at them on LinkedIn. You can look at their demo reels, and then you can critically compare yourself. Okay, look what they put on the reel. Look, that got them a job. Look at my reel. Oh, it's the same. Or let me look at their CV. Reach out to them. Can I see the CV you got? And you can do some little ground homework there, which is just basic stuff. And I think you can. That's going to empower you guys and actually give you a head start.
That's awesome. All right. Well, we are right there at a little bit over an hour. That was an awesome conversation. Wow. Thank you so much, Chris. I'm really glad to have met you and to have this conversation.
Beautiful. Hey, I'm going to be at SIGGRAPH this year, so if you're around, I'd love to catch up.
That'd be great. Yeah, if I can get myself, it's really hard for me to get out of Laguna Beach. It's too beautiful.
You're too comfortable.
Too comfortable. Yeah, but it's a thought. It's a thought. All right, my friend.
Anyway,
thank you.
All right, we'll speak soon. Thanks, guys. Good luck on your journeys. All right.
All right. Guys, you got any questions? You know where to reach me. I can funnel them over to Chris. And thank you guys for joining here live. All right, take care, Chris.
Perfect. See you guys.
All right. So I want to thank you so much for being here, for taking the time, and for listening to this podcast. And I want to ask a couple of things from you. Number one, make sure you leave a comment or you rate this on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever it is that you're getting this. That's going to make a big difference in helping us get the word out and get people to know who we are. All right. The other thing is I want to make sure you know where to find us. So you can head over to www.gameartinstitute.com, where you can learn about our flagship program, which is the Game Artist Bootcamp. This is designed for those who are really looking to move the needle on their career and really lock in that job. You may have gone to school and learned a bunch, maybe haven't learned a bunch, but at the Game Art Institute, the primary focus we have is the very specific industry skills, the triggers that you really need to hit in that job interview. What are the specific things that they're looking for? That's what we're going to be training you on. We're taking applications right now for environment artists and for character artists. So make sure you head over to www.gameartinstitute.com and apply today. That way we can have that conversation, make sure this is a fit for you, make sure that you're a fit for it, and if everything is perfect, then we will sign you up for that right away and get you into your training and start moving the needle on your career. All right, thank you so much again for being here. Take care, have an amazing day.